Hello, this is Jen with Honeysuckle and Glitter Disabilities. Today I would like to share with you a book that I wrote. The name of the book is We Won't Let Rocks Harm You. It is available on Amazon for order. It was written and illustrated by me, Jennifer Altman Albertson. My friend Wendy Duckworth Vance edited the book. I own the copyrights for this book. Betsy was cuddling with her grandpa in the den as he watched television. She heard the front door open, jumped up, and ran to greet her grandma. Mama Grace had just closed the screen door as Betsy rushed up for her hug. "Hey, baby girl," Mama Grace said. She wrapped her arms around Betsy and plopped a quick kiss on top of her head. Betsy quietly trailed Mama Grace as she set her purse down in her bedroom before heading to the kitchen. Then Betsy climbed on a stool as her grandmother washed her hands at the sink. "So what's the matter?" Mama Grace asked. "You're usually chirping on about school by now. You are never this quiet." She started pulling out pots and pans while she waited for Betsy's answer. "Brad and some of the other boys keep throwing rocks at Wendy," Betsy blurted out. Mama Grace stilled for just a second before continuing to add flour to a bowl. "Did she tell the teacher?" "Yes, but Wendy can't tell who's throwing the rocks. She has trouble seeing. I told the teacher which boys were doing it, but they all said they didn't. Mr. Marvin says it's my word against theirs, and he can't do anything," Betsy explained. Mama Grace shook her head as she poured a little milk into another bowl. "Is it okay to fight at school if it's for a good reason?" she asked her grandma. A little laugh escaped Mama Grace as she dipped a chicken leg first in the bowl of the milk and then the flour. "Are you going to fight all those boys?" she asked, putting the chicken leg in the frying pan. Betsy thought for a moment. "If I have to," she said softly. "That doesn't sound like that is what you want to do," Mama Grace pointed out as she added a flour-coated thigh to the pan. With a deep sigh, Betsy said, "Someone always gets hurt when you fight." Mama Grace glanced over her shoulder and gave Betsy a bright smile before stirring the butter beans. "If everyone was as smart as my grandbaby, our world would be a better place." Betsy smiled at the compliment. Then she frowned. "If I don't fight, how can I help Wendy?" As she poured the hot water off the boiled potatoes, Mama Grace pursed her lips. Quietly, she began mashing the potatoes. After she added butter and milk, she set the potatoes aside. "Why don't you wash your hands and help me with the biscuits?" Betsy was confused, but she jumped down from the stool and followed her grandma's directions. Mama Grace had already mixed and kneaded the dough. The pale blob sat on a large piece of wax paper. To Betsy's surprise, she got down a drinking glass. She rubbed a little flour on the glass and used it to roll out the dough. Then she pressed the mouth of the glass into the dough. She pulled out a perfect biscuit and placed it on the greased baking sheet. She handed the glass to Betsy, who had a puzzled expression. "Finish for me, please." "Yes, ma'am," Betsy replied. When she was done, Betsy put the glass in the sink. "Why didn't we use the rolling pin and biscuit cutter?" "There are more ways to solve problems than the obvious ones," Mama Grace replied as she put the biscuits in the oven. "I thought it was a lesson you could use to help Wendy." 4 days later, Betsy was helping Mama Grace cook supper when her father came into the kitchen. "How are you, Mama?" James asked and gave Mama Grace an affectionate squeeze as he set his lunch box on the counter. "Just fine," she replied, patting his cheek. Then James swept Betsy up in his arms. "Hey, Pumpkin, how's Daddy's girl?" Betsy threw her arms around her father's neck. "I'm wonderful," she replied enthusiastically. "I hope you didn't come home with any more bruises today," James said. Betsy shook her head and grinned. No, that's not going to be a problem anymore. James smiled and set Betsy back on her feet. Good. Did your teacher punish those boys who were throwing rocks at you? He asked as he peered at the stove to see what Mama Grace was cooking. No, Betsy said as she returned to making biscuits. Mr. Marvin never caught them. But you told him about what they were doing, James said, clearly getting upset. They denied it. It was my word against theirs. It won't happen again, so it doesn't matter, Betsy explained, as she handed the biscuits to Mama Grace to put in the oven. I thought the boys were throwing rocks at Wendy, Mama Grace said as she added a dab of baking soda to the black-eyed peas. What? James exclaimed, looking from his mother to his daughter. I stood between Wendy and the boys so the rocks hit me, Betsy replied. Now James was really upset. Why would you do that? Betsy shrugged. Wendy was getting hit by the rocks. I didn't want to fight the boys, so I found another way to solve the problem. It wasn't your problem. You didn't need to get involved. Wendy can take care of herself, James said firmly. That attitude is why we have bullies in this world, Mama Grace replied, glaring at her son. She added some ham to the collard greens. Then she turned to smile at Betsy. What happened when you stood in front of Wendy? I got hit with rocks, but the second day, Jill stood with me. The boys didn't throw as many rocks. On the third day, Jill, Billy, and Bobby stood with me. Only Brad threw a couple of rocks, Betsy told her grandma. What happened today? Mama Grace asked before James could say anything. Betsy grinned. At least 20 kids stood around Wendy. Even Brad didn't want to throw rocks anymore. I still think you should only worry about yourself, James grumbled. Mama Grace put her hands on her hips. I'm proud of Betsy. Bullies will always find someone to torment. This time it was Wendy. Next time it might be Betsy, she said. James started to open his mouth, but Mama Grace wasn't done. Too many people stand by and let others get hurt. During the Depression, those of us who survived did so by helping each other. James sighed. You're right as always, Mama. He turned and picked up Betsy. I am proud of you, Betsy. You did the right thing. Is easy for a daddy to worry. I'll just have to remember you're a smart little girl. Betsy gave her father a big kiss on the cheek. I love you, Daddy. James used his free arm to catch his mother in a hug. And I love both of you. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. I will leave a link to this book on Amazon in the description of the video. Please have a wonderful day.